from that quick timeout. Well, it's still the special edition for the hunger nationwide protest. Now, is there really no turning back on this protest? Because we're seeing how it's all playing out. But we still have Salihu has joined us here in the studio, and we still have our guest here in the studio. Thank you so much for staying with us, sir.
Thank you so much. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, Kano, Nasarawa, Abuja, and across the different states that we've seen the development, take a different toll. These are some of the issues that we'll be bringing to you, of course, on the program. Like Lilian said, we still have in the studio AIG Wilson Inalegwu, a retired police officer who was once, of course, the commissioner of police here in the FCT. AIG, perhaps I would ask this question because just a couple of days ago, we spoke about the security implications of having a protest, that does not have faces supporting or at least leading them. And you spoke to concerns about the possibilities of this protest taking such dimensions and taking such trajectories. Would one now say your points are vindicated?
No, these are constant points. Before you arrived, in our earlier discussion, I stated it, I repeated it severally. And I said, look, everything you do is about coordination. You can't do it alone. You've got to collaborate, you've got to cooperate. And so the situation that we find is the police or the security are operating blindly with the snippets of intelligence that they have. They have to work with that. The organizers are enlightening people. They shouldn't make it so, as if it's something that it's about Nigeria. Nigeria is not for one person. And I was telling them that because somebody is in uniform doesn't mean that the person is unreasonable. You see, there are standard operating procedures. When you are developing an operations order, for example, for such protests, what you hear from the people organizing, you factor them in your operations order. If you have them, it helps you in your deployment. Now, what the security forces deploy based on intelligence, I think it was only yesterday some of them came out. They had meeting with the IG and all the rest of it. But what they need to do is come up and say, look, this is what we intend to do. Or we want to march from here. We want to march from Beggar Junction through Wuse Market down to Zone 4 up to Eagle Square. You define the road. And the police say, no, Wuse is a market. If you go there, some of your protesters may branch. So why don't we go through Zone 7? I hope you understand. Yes. We go to, after the Oando, we turn right. That is part of the strategy you deploy. But when you're operating and the people make it look, we don't trust you because you are wearing uniform, it's wrong.
But then again,
sorry, talking about trust, so we don't get, of course, into that topic. Now let's talk about trust.
Yes.
Is it? You're mentioning that the fact that people don't trust the government. Is it new? They don't trust the security. Is it new? Is it new that these people don't trust the police?
But you see, I'm sorry, I have to say something. And the police is about the people and the government. They don't go to the left, they don't go to the right. But others are about regime, whoever is in government. If you understand the police like that, you are able to approach them better. Because if, for example, other forces, the government has, but the police is saying, look, this is what the law says. That's the way you are trained. And that is why the oath you take is to protect, enforce the law without fear or favor. That is the training of the police. And many police officers are very professional. And even if there are many police officers, even if you are president, you say, arrest Ismail, for example. They say, if I arrest him, what offense will I charge him with? Do you understand? So, if you do not trust the police with all I have said, then there is a problem. Because if you trust the police, it means some of these miscreants that are infiltrating and disrupting the peaceful protest, you deal with them. Because collaboratively, you remove them. And And that's where you march responsibly. You march from one point to the other. They give you.
But AIG, how do we then explain the situations and the sites that we are seeing from Kano, for instance? We've seen young Nigerians approach government buildings, cutting away chairs. What business does these chairs have to do with the fact that there is hunger in the land? And we've seen little to no input from these security agencies, be it the police, civil defense, who are supposed to be protecting or manning these critical assets in the state, do anything in terms of apprehending those who carted away these items.
When you have such a large crowd, unless you are going to kill up to 100, certain things are going to happen. Look at the January 6th, 2020 violence in the United States. With all the barriers and all of it, they were able to breach it because they have aim. They want to go and open drawers, see if they have money. They want to steal certain things. But in a state like Kano Government House, you've got to create a buffer, a place that if people breach it, you know that they are for violence.
So you're saying at this point they missed something there?
No, well, I wasn't there.
Okay.
I didn't study the operations of that to see the way they arrange their deployment. But I think going forward, the government houses and other critical infrastructure should be thinking of having barriers. You have those barriers you see in the stadium when there are matches. You join them and you put the officers behind them. When people begin to push some 200 meters away from the government house, for example, you're able to reorganize yourself to push them back.
Indeed.
So that they don't get that close. And that is why I talked about, in my last program, I talked about protection of critical national infrastructure assets. And so in deploying with the police, with the civil defense, I think one of their roles is protection of critical national infrastructure. And what do? So they have the police usually will prepare the general operations order, and then those other elements will come up with their own, and you see where you juggle them in your ops order. So you now say, look, civil defense, how many people do you have? Oh, we are bringing 5,000 for this operation. Okay, look, we're going to deploy this number to the National Christian Center, the National Mosque, and all this, and then you have radios that are interoperable. Rely on your police communication alone. That means the guy in the civil defense, the guy in the DSS, the guy in the military is able to talk to you on your radio. So where in their location, when they're overwhelmed, you're able to send reinforcement. And so that's how you bring the deployment together. And in that way, it will act as force multiplier. You have enough people. You are not only dealing with the police, you are dealing with, might be the customs, the immigration who are brought forward, and then you have a kind of simulation. If we have this situation, because the police usually have simulation exercise with the military. When you go on, during our time, they call it intermediate command course in Jos of certain rank, superintendent, chief superintendent, you go to Jaji and spend some time, and you simulate a kind of insurgency and what the police reaction and when the military comes. We don't have such collaboration, I don't think, with the civil defense. So when you are anticipating this kind of thing, it's an opportunity for you to get together and begin to assign roles, apportion roles, and then you deploy them in that way. In that way, you increase your number, and then the friends of the services who will be giving information, so that as they are cutting leave, I say, this guy is a criminal in our neighborhood. I'm sure he's not going for demonstration. They are alerted, the SIB, the DSS, they pick them up. So it's a joint operation. The military at this time is not part of it.
It's not supposed to be involved.
No, it's not involved.
So do we now describe the situation that we are seeing, for example, in the FCT as an over-militarization of the process? I mean, because at some point I saw clips from, of course, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I saw, a military tank there that was supposed to be stationed, and at some point I saw how, a crowd of, do I say angry protesters or angry Nigerians, started hurling objects at it. So would you say that the presence of the military at that point, at that material time, sort of exacerbated the tensions?
Well, I ordinarily shouldn't exacerbate the situation, because they are not talking to anybody. They are just there because the gas brigade has a responsibility for protecting the villa and the FCT. That's their jurisdiction. So you are not going to ask them because those are their usual, position. But you will see that they will not go near the demonstrators. They will not, or the protesters. They will go there. So they are in their place protecting critical national infrastructure. You are not going to send them away.
All right, let's quickly touch on Lagos before we let's look at Lagos. We know how Lagos is with protests. We saw our experience with the NSAS and how it played out. In your experience, what should be done with security agencies in Lagos at this point in time and the protesters?
The standard operating procedure is basically the same.
Okay.
Because whether you are in Lagos has a huge population of 20 to 22 million, they say. So when you have such, but it is not the whole of Lagos that when you are deploying. Of course, you know that Ojota.
There are certain hotspots.
Yes. Or Oshodi, or Mushin. So when you are doing your deployment, you rely more on intelligence, and you've got to be mobile, highly mobile. You have, and then when the first deployment you make, they are civil, they are carrying no weapon, they are just using their hand. Please don't do anything, don't cause problem. But in every place you go, there are leaders. In every place, if you go to Ajigunle, Olodia Papa, there are leaders. You identify those key people. Once you continually engage them, they are going to talk. Because these guys will live. They are not just, they all have leaders. So that is why we talk about continuous engagement. And that is why you have the police community relations committee, which is a structure that you have, the police has, to reaching the public. And then the DPUs also have their relationship and all the other officers on the line.
Let me come back to you.
The place is big, but when you break it down in policing, it becomes small.
Indeed. Okay. All right, then let's quickly take Dr. Aminu Hayatu, Senior Lecturer Political Science at the Bayero University, Kano. He joins us via video chat to give, of course, his comments on the developments. Good afternoon, Dr. Hayatu. Welcome to the program. First of all, can you give us your thoughts as to the direction that this protest has now taken, especially in Kano, where we see that the front of the government house has sort of turned, to the unexpected, if I may just say.
Good afternoon, my brothers in the studio and sister, and good afternoon, Nigerians. And I think that it's not a new story now, that there's a serious problem in Kano because of the outbreak of those young people and attacking, indiscriminately attacking government facilities and private individuals' properties. And I think that this is really very alarming because this was actually much anticipated, and I think I wrote this in my Facebook page earlier when the protesters had announced that they want to embark on protest. It's their constitutional right to do that, but I knew that this danger was coming because the protest that doesn't have leadership, a protest that is not well organized, and even the communication between the protesters and the government quota was very weak and didn't have direction. What you would expect is what we saw, happening today. Early in the morning, I jumped out of my bed to really witness the kind of organizing that the protest was having, and whether there are protest leaders and whether the slogans in the protest have some sort of coordination, that gives a direction of what the protesters want and what they are calling on the government to do. I haven't actually seen much of that. Although in the morning in Kano, it was, it started like a peaceful protest. People started coming out. Many of the protesters were even like spectators. They folded their arms, looking at other protesters, chanting some songs here and there. That was what it looked like in the morning. But as the day rises, phone calls were made across, by individuals on the streets, perhaps to their friends at home, that people are out on the streets so that they can come, because we saw
that the population was adding up and more people were coming. Unfortunately, such protests were happening in other places, and we saw what was actually happening. It was a bit more organized in other places, like we saw in Abuja, for example. But in Kano, there were more of, as time moves on, there were more of hoodlums, that actually came out with the intention of destroying and looting public properties. And that was what we saw.
Okay.
We've seen, the government house, the National Communications Commission's branch in Kano being vandalized. You see young people, a small boy of 15 years carrying, AC on their head, or television, or under chairs and windows, vandalized from vandalized properties of different government establishments and even private individuals' properties. We've seen the destruction of, businesses like the Rufaidah Yogurt and areas around the Zaria Road, behind Abudubako Secretariat.
As a student and scholar of politics, Doctor, can you hear me? So yes. What would you ascribe as the cause of these developments, especially bearing in mind that this protest took well over 8 weeks, to plan and prepare for? But then again, on D-Day, we see the breakdown of law and order at this magnitude in Kano State. What would you say is responsible, for all of this, despite continuous call on citizens, not to go beyond their limits and, of course, beyond their rights?
3 major factors. One is that the angry youths who say that they are hungry and that they need to demonstrate to the government the magnitude of their hunger and anger, actually could have been engaged more properly and in a more organized way by the government, rather than making, mere calls and inviting some individuals who have spoken on social media that the protest must happen. It could have been, there could have been a deterrence, which will be in form of a proactive action by the government, because most of the issues raised by the protesters have made rounds in the social media, and the government is aware of these issues. The government could have, prevented even the happening of the protest, probably by taking some important decision and making announcements, and also assuring the protesters that all other issues raised will be brought to the table and discussed. The protesters can actually be deterred by that promise if they see, an immediate action taken by government on those promises.
All right, Doctor. Let's look at Kano. Hello, Doctor, can you hear me?
The second reason in Kano.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, I can hear you.
Go ahead.
The second reason, especially in Kano, is that the government of Nigeria could have known that there are states that you could call volatile in terms of this issue of protest. Very fragile states like Kano, Kaduna, Lagos, Rivers. These are very important states that normally when there is any form of, public, outbreak of anything, it used to be terrible in these states because of their population. So the government could have detected, and actually, as the DIG or AIG said in the studio, that intelligence could be deployed to understand the dynamics in this state, so that it will be determined even the number of physical security personnel that will be deployed and the other existential threats, in consideration of these existential threats that will be deployed to the state. But looking at what happened, I have a friend who before the attack of the Nigerian Communications Commission saw the body language of the protesters and rushed to the police, to report to them that something terrible is about to happen here. But the police just looked akimbo and couldn't do anything. you could relate that with two reasons also. Perhaps because the police themselves are aggrieved of the situation, so they are probably, protesters in grief. They cannot be able to join the protesters in the street, but they are also hungry and probably angry with the government. So they refuse. And the other reason that could have prevented them from acting is that they know that the number of people on the street, they cannot contain them. They cannot be able to actually make arrests effectively. They cannot deter any form of threat. They could not do anything because they are handicapped. They do not have adequate equipment to be able to do that, for example. And the third reason that probably they are afraid, to apply force. And the next thing in the media will be that the police are killing people or shooting at them or something like that. So really, all of this, you could relate it, to lack of government's proactive, disposition in the way that this protest could have been contained in a better way.
All right, Doctor, before we let the AIG here in the studio comment, I'm glad you spoke about how volatile Kano can be, because I was going to ask you that question. Now, what could have been done differently? Because you said the government should have been proactive enough. We know how Kano is. We saw what happened during the election. We saw what happened during the whole back and forth. Recently, during the emirship tussle. We saw all of that play out. So in your experience as one who is vast in the politics there in Kano, what do you think would have been done differently to avert this?
Volatile states in themselves are a sort of early warning signal at every point in time. So the state could have actually deployed more intelligence, within the civil populace to be able to understand what might likely, happen in case, the protest goes out of hand. And it would have been that there is more, because if there is more deployment of security officials, civil defense, the police, joint security, force, between the army and the police and others, it could have been that these, physical security operatives are stationed in strategic positions that they could be able to really deter the protesters from attacking, public and private properties. Because other than that, you cannot stop the protesters from coming out to exercise their fundamental, human rights and freedom. So this is what the government could have done, actually, to tighten and beef up security in more strategic areas, so that the protesters could not have the opportunity to be able to, to come en masse, and undertake these activities that we have seen today.
Sorry, it just misbehaving now. Doctor, you do realize we have the former AIG here with us in the studio. So AIG, now, I spoke about Lagos and how volatile Lagos can be, and we also have Kano. So what's your take on what he said?
I honestly would want AIG to respond to some of these allegations, because I listened to him smile when Doctor mentioned.
I think these are issues I discussed extensively in the earlier program and the current program. I talked about deployment strategy, that when you have situations like you're going to have a peaceful protest, you will factor critical national infrastructure. So you're going to deploy the communication is an important critical national infrastructure. Very important. The government house, number one. Communication, worship centers. And I talked about those deployments. That one is
sacrosanct.
You've got to do that, because otherwise, because they are going to, those are places they will go. You see, protest has faces. It starts peacefully. Peaceful protest. The next thing is looting, as you witness. The next stage is burning. They carry TV on their head. When they have emptied the shop, the next thing they do, they set fire.
There are situations where some have said they are waiting for the protest to happen. Some have said because they know on that day they would be living with a brand new motorcycle, brand new freezer, and the likes of that. So these
things are in phases. And I talked extensively about cooperation, collaboration, and coordination. And I say the civil defense, working with the police. There's no need all of them deploy among the crowd and to be seen. No. They will take their operations order, share with the police, and the police say, look, these are the list, because every command, I imagine, has a list of critical national infrastructure, and you prioritize them, and you see what number you deploy. And so if the police see that the communication center, because it's very important, you're going to deploy to that location. And when you deploy, it's okay, you've got, like I give an example, that perhaps civil defense is giving you 2,000 or 3,000 personnel. And once the civil defense is giving you this number of personnel, what are you going to see? It's okay, look, this is the number of personnel we have earmarked for this area. So, okay, we are going to take 10 civil defense, 3 police to be here, because the police is going to be more involved in riot dispersal or crowd dispersal as witness. So you are not going to push them out so much. You put them so that they will be the ones that will police the peaceful march, and then to respond to the situation suddenly develop. Because those that are marching with them, you are not going to engage them in anything. They are going to be appealing. But you are going to have that critical mass that is there for deployment, for smoke, using the smoke, or when it becomes critical, when they are burning everywhere.
So now, on the scale, where do these responders now stand? Because I know we should have first responders, second responders, and then those that would come in to ensure that when it becomes violent, they come in to control the situation, and better still use minimum force, as you said,
exactly,
to control the situation.
So those ones, you look at your town, in terms of movement, what will it take to have them move? For government house, you're going to have that critical mass there. You're not going to wait for a response. No, they are there in the government house to push back anybody that is going there. Do you understand?
Yes,
all right.
And you are going to also have another critical mass in certain locations. And I like what he said. There is the element of early warning and response system. Of course, by now, the Kano should have developed early warning and response system, because there is a pending dispute.
Indeed,
there
the
are
state.
parallel emirs, and so this is so that's early warning. And then when you are planning for this peaceful protest, you are going to factor that. And there is a lot to...
Before we get to all of that, now let's quickly hear from Nigerians. The phone lines are open. We would love to hear your thoughts. Tell us what is happening in your area. Is the protest still ongoing? Has it stopped you from moving? Has it gotten violent? We'd love to hear from you. So yes, the phone lines are open. Do well to call in. Drop messages via WhatsApp. The numbers are showing on your screen right away. So drop messages via WhatsApp, and then also do well to call us and let us know what exactly is happening in your area. If you have questions as well, we have Ed here with us.
Yes, indeed. I would be really glad to have Nigerians call in, and ask these questions.
It's important there. And another appeal I want to make to Nigerians: in your location, where you find suspicious individuals or individuals acting suspiciously, pick up your phone and call the helplines. Whether you're in Kano, in Gusau, in Sokoto, in Lagos, there are national helplines and there are command helplines. Call those helplines, because there are officers that are deployed on patrol, and those are for response. So if you call this control room, they are able to respond. Don't wait until they call something, because your location is not the venue of the protest. And you find some 10 people with leave marching from one place to another. You've got to report it. You don't wait until they begin to attack people.
Before you do that. But then again, I want to go back to Dr. Aminu, who joins us via video chat, of course. Doctor, if you can hear me, would you then blame what we are seeing currently going on in Kano in one way or the other, to the kind of political climate that has been nurtured in the state over time? I mean, like Lilian has alluded to, like the AIG has alluded to, there's been, at every point in time, one form of political dispute or another. If it's not the state governorship tussle, it would be the emirship tussle. So would you say the political climate has been responsible for this sort of breakdown of law and order that we've been seeing in Kano over time, to the extent that it's now become a normal?
Yes, actually, you cannot you cannot detach these reasons from the political climate. You know, any political atmosphere you see in Kano, you know, is arising from the nature and dynamics of the Kano society. And politics over time in Kano, although even historically, you know, the division between, you know, as a result of political party, between, you know, the party of what they call the party of the masses and that of the elites has always been a bone of contention. And that has actually you know, evolved to manifest in the political climate, you know, that Kano has over any issue, no matter how slight it is, and then, you know, coupled with the population of the state. Most of the youths you see, you know, on the streets, look at what the protest that is happening. The children on the street, many of them, if you check their background very well, they are actually not enlightened. They are just young people who have not been adequately educated. And so when these protests are happening, they are just always desperate to come out and, you know, just engage in all sorts of violence without control. And if give the end of today, if you talk to some leaders in Kano, what they will begin to do is to begin to apportion blame based on political party affiliation, you know, rather than facing the issues based on realistically the reasons why, you know, youths engage in violence whenever there is the slightest trigger. And you know, explanations, when you go on in radio stations today, you will hear, you know, chieftains of political parties coming out to blame, point accusing fingers at each other. And everything is eventually politicized to the extent that there is no control. And even the government, you know, look at the government in power, for example. Probably some of the youths, you know, may have been, you know, out of the grievances.
Hello? Uh-oh. All right, it seems we've been getting a couple of calls from Nigerians. We opened the phone line. So we're going to take a couple of calls while they're coming, while also waiting for Doctor to join us here. But while we're waiting on that now, AIG, you can see this. I mean, no, I remember the end SARS protest. I remember people looting GP tanks on their head. People were carrying GP tanks, were carrying toilet seats, grinding machines, and
deep freezers. Different items that had no business with the reason for the protest. We also saw the same thing happen during the COVID-19 lockdown era, where persons went on the streets looting warehouses, of course, where they felt that palliatives, you know, were stored. But it didn't save private business owners, of course, AIG, you know, from the negative effect of that, because we saw people loot into warehouses of private individuals who were doing legitimate businesses and cutting away with items, you know, from there. But then again, in all of this, what role does political awareness and education have to play in ensuring that things like this do not become the order of the day whenever, you know, we have nationwide mass movements such as this?
I think the National Orientation Agency has his job well cut out.
But we all know that the National Orientation Agency is grossly underfunded.
You know, the instrument of national power resides with the government, and information is one of them. That is why we talk about communication, not just military or police powers or something. Those instruments of national power reside with government, and it is the responsibility of government to use these instruments to create a peaceful, just and fair society. And when the government is taking certain actions, really, they need to develop policies. And those advice can come from perhaps the Office of National Security Advisor. You look at, like, I believe he must have developed a lot of advisory to Mr. President on this that is happening. And what am I talking about? You take Kano. Doctor gave example of what is happening in Kano, what is happening in Port Harcourt, and all these things. These are issues, these are the advice I believe the NSA will provide to Mr. President and develop policies. Look at, if you do this, this may happen. And this is what I think you can do. But I think what we need to do now, what the government need to develop now, is to come about with a policy on managing the fallout of the fuel subsidy removal. And I think it's an urgent priority for government. Government has been talking about it, but might be based on looking at issues as they are, I think they are able to develop an informed policy that the government will begin to do, and you see the tension will begin to come down. Because government, I believe, cannot go back.
Indeed. And by extension,
but it's about coming with a policy.
Indeed.
And I say, look, these are the effects, and this is what we think you government can do, and you make the job of law enforcement easier.
But AIG, then again, it's already too late to prevent this from escalating, because as it is, it has already escalated.
Yeah.
What can be done in the interim and, of course, in the long run to prevent this sort of escalation? Because, of course, we know at this point, sending the security agencies in to douse tension is only going to add, petrol to the flame. So perhaps what do we need to do in terms of political strategy to calm the nerves of these already irate youths who are on the streets, in one way or the other, trying to vent their grievances? Of course, for those that are out there to legitimately vent grievances, and not for the other ones who are breaking into government facilities to cancel their properties.
For where there is total breakdown of law and order, I think there should be curfew, because that's the only way you can take a hold on the situation, so that you don't send the security forces out to use lethal power, lethal force. So that we are going to do. But going forward, the now government has to put together eggheads to brainstorm. There should be a way out. There are things we begin to see visible. Might be you're going to have buses, more buses on the street, broken down buses fixed, and then you could see them. We're not seeing new buses. Oh, government has reacted. That is something government can do. And it's not also going to be so easy to do it immediately. But government, through the leaders, begin to address some of these concerns. And I think there's a lot that is on all we are talking about in the studio. I'm sure government is even way ahead of us, because they have the instruments to get all the information, all the intelligence that they need to have. So these are issues government can do. But right now, when you are going to come up with anything, you've got to develop a policy. What is going to be the reaction of people? What are we going to do to cushion this reaction?
Okay, but sorry, you mentioned curfew. At this point in time, with the state it has gotten to, do you think curfew would make any difference?
Oh, when it's getting like Kano, in those areas, you're not going to impose curfew on the entire city. You look at that area.
Those hotspots.
Because if you don't do that, once a situation gets out of hand, if in the morning, before this happened, you've people located at the communication area and all that, and they're able to stop this thing, you can control it. But when they're coming in their large numbers, what are you going to do? Are you going to kill all of them?
All right, then we'll hold that thought. Now we have a caller. Hello, what's your name and where are you calling from?
Good afternoon.
Good morning. Can you speak up a little bit? Oh, good afternoon. Can you speak up a little bit so we can get to hear you properly? What's your name and where are you calling from?
Oh.
Go ahead, we can hear you. Unfortunately, we can barely make out what you're saying. If you would give us a call back, so as to get your thoughts, your concerns, and your comments on these developments, of course. Doctor, if you're here with us, I don't know if the technical crew can confirm if we still have Dr. Ayatu.
Yes, I'm here.
All right, so if doctor, so we're talking about saving the situation from escalating more than it already has. What are those political steps or strategies that you feel can be put in place right now in the interim to ensure, that these irate protesters, as the case may be, go back home? Take, for example, would you say if the president should address the nation right now, it would douse some of the tensions?
But before, addressing the nation, like our respected brother said in the studio, the immediate thing that needs to be done is to put a curfew, even if not entirely on the state, but in those areas that these activities are happening. And most importantly, it's not only the curfew, because by the time, if you don't put the curfew, in good time, what it means is that by the time it is, getting close to evening hours, there is barely little thing that the security forces can do, because you are talking about when the night encroaches, and a lot of more other destruction, violence could happen, in the states, and including more other areas, because you see children, taking televisions and ACs and fridge to their homes. What it means is that they are kings. Yes.
Go ahead,
Sorry.
Doctor. We can hear you.
Okay. What it meant is that their mates at home would see that there is an opportunity out there also to go and get their own. So more, numbers of protesters or hoodlums will get on the street, and nobody knows what's going to happen. So I think curfew first, and then the state governor, himself has to take a drastic measure, part of which is to come out and address the state, to really express displeasure with the way things are going on, and make some immediate promises, that they are going to link up with the president of the country. They have had these grievances, and that he assures that some actions will be taken. That's all for the immediate, stoppage of this violence. But for the long term, actually, there is this thing in Nigeria. Any government that does not discharge its responsibilities properly, it loses the moral higher ground, or the so-called moral foundation, to continue to ask people to make additional sacrifices. So when promises by government are empty, what it means is that disillusionment and mistrust between the people in government and the led is what will be the order of the day. And there is no amount of appeal that you will extend to the public that they will trust the government by its words.
But
so it's important that the government takes advantage.
Doctor, we have a caller now.
Let's quickly hear from this Nigerian.
Good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me? Welcome to the program. What's your name and where are you calling from?
This is Salihu Deji from Bida, Niger State.
Salihu from Bida. Welcome to the program. Please go ahead with your contributions. How's the protest shaping up there?
Yeah, the protest is calm here in Niger State. We thank God.
Yeah, go ahead. So what are your contributions with regards to these developments and what the government should do? Because, of course, in some states, it has gotten out of hand, if one would say.
Yes, I see you ask that question, and that's why I call in.
Go ahead.
So, since it has reached to this extent, the youth are angry. The major group that is affected in Nigeria is the youth. Majority of youth in Nigeria are unemployed, and their parents, their guardians are unable to cater for them. So youth resort into stealing, getting themselves into banditry and all other crimes. So the major group that is being hurt by the president is the youth. And there's nothing that can calm the nerve of youth, except if the president can bring a lasting, longer solution. And what I can suggest, because I don't buy into protest, because protest is going to lead into violence, and violence will take us into back to square zero, and we get nothing out of it. But when there is hungry, it will bring anger. So my advice is that the president should make a very difficult solution, which is what? Find a leverage environment for the youth to thrive.
But this would take time, Ali, wouldn't it?
My 3 points are...
This would take time, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it will not take time. You can address the nation now that youth that graduate should be employed automatically, even though they cannot be able to pay them up to the amount that is of minimum wage.
But Ali, isn't that a pipe dream, bearing in mind that it's not like the jobs are readily available for these youths to be absorbed?
There are a lot of gaps in the ministries.
Well, like you can see,
there is a lot.
State Road. here in the commercial city of Kano.
Thank you so much. I really want to ask Doctor this question before we come to Ogazi. So, Doctor, before today, on the eve of on the heels of all of these, we saw the president invite to the presidential villa governors, traditional rulers, religious leaders, student union, and other unions as well to the villa, prevailing upon them to call on all members of their unions and all sections of the society to, as much as possible, disregard coming out to protest. But then again, today we are seeing what we are seeing on our TV screens across the different parts of the country. Would you now say that Nigerian youth, in one way or the other, have refused to heed the directive of their leaders not to protest due to their situations being more dire than it is being reported? Or is this a different situation?
Yes. No, that's what I was telling you earlier on before the caller actually came in. I was really telling you that, the successful governments in Nigeria have a history of mistrust between them and the people they lead. And this is very important because at a critical time when you want to send a communication, as a president of the country, to your people, if they do disregard that information, you should begin to ask yourself what really is wrong. And that's not the issue. When all these leaders went to meet with the president, for example, the issue should not be that the president should send a message to the people that they should not please come out and protest, but that these are his words for them. These are his promises.
All right.
Because he has seen the issues. They don't even need to come out for him to know what they are asking. They say it's bad governance and they have listed a number of issues.
Take this call from another Nigerian, if you would allow me. Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the program. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear us?
Okay, seems we lost that caller. Apologies, Doctor, for interrupting you. Please proceed with your thoughts.
Leaders who have met with the president have been able to come home, to the protesters to say that this is the promises that the president has made. Or at least the president himself come out and address the nation and tell these, disillusions and,
disgruntled elements.
Protesters to say that this is the steps that he is intending to take against the issues they have raised. A lot of that information would have actually naturally, made these protesters to wait and see what is going to happen. But I told you, because of the historical mistrust between the government and the people rarely, believe what comes from the government in terms of promises and assurances that they get.
All right, Doctor, you spoke about mistrust. You just mentioned mistrust, and earlier when we asked of immediate solutions that could be given, you said one of them should be that the government should come out and make a promise. Would that make any difference, being that people actually have little or no trust in the government and their promises?
Yes, the government can restore the trust between it and the people by making promises and fulfilling them immediately. For example, most of the issues that have been raised, some of the issues are very critical. For example, this issue of, removal of subsidy. If the government promised that it's going to look into that and immediately, even if it is by the slightest percentage, bring subsidy back into, for the people, that means that ease of life will ensue and people will begin to see changes in the way that the hardships are affecting them. And that could translate into them trusting that the government, is all out to fulfill its promises. And then step by step, the government could be rolling out, some of these promises they have made in terms of concrete actions so that the people would begin to believe what the government is saying.
Indeed.
But if you saw what happened during the NSAS. The government made some commitments during the NSAS. Very few of those commitments actually, made their way to become a success. All of the other issues raised by the people were not actually looked into after the promise. So this is the constant mistrust between the government and the people, which
Indeed.
actually prevents, providing solutions to some of the issues raised by these current protesters.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. AIG. Back to you in the studio. So one would easily forget that aside being a retired police officer who, traversed up to the rank of Assistant Inspector General of Police, but most importantly, you're also a Nigerian, and this issue affects you as much, as it affects everyone else. What's your assessment on these developments, and what are the quick wins that we can use to ensure that, this issue is as much as possible managed in terms of political, intervention?
I think there should be sincerity of purpose and transparency in dealing with some of these issues. Of course, there are some of them that look so impossible. I don't think fuel price we're going to return to 100 naira, unless you remove zeros from then maybe the highest currency in Nigeria becomes 100 naira.
Indeed.
Then you will go back to the pre-25 naira and all that. So but I think they just want to make their voice heard. I think the government needs to look at some of those issues raised. For example, in terms of public transportation, let them see that there are new buses plying the roads, and that even though the price of fuel has gone that high, you don't even need your car on weekends when you want to go out with your family. Otherwise, if they see more buses, they don't have to be in the rain. And I think that may assuage their anger. But the government can do that. And I think government perhaps is doing that already. But it's something that I think government can do. Secondly, I think there should be more engagement. The civil society, because I think this protest was organized largely by members of the civil society. I don't know if they were part of the group that the president met, but I think there is a need to have a kind of town hall meeting with the civil bureaus, recognized civil society groups.
So messages that have been sent in via WhatsApp from viewers from across Nigeria. This one says there is no protest going on here in Sankra, Benue State, since the governor has imposed no protest should be carried on in the axis since June 3rd, 2024. We are indoors. Joshua writes from Benue.
And we have Yusuf from Salihu saying, we lost 2 people so far from the protest. Actually, the protest is peaceful. No looting, no vandalism. But we just don't know why the police choose to shoot directly at the protestants.
Another development there says, hello, my contribution here is about the Kano protest. I think there's high possibility that something like this may happen like during the protest due to the issue at Kano right now, the issue of emirs, which most of the people in Kano are only waiting for an opportunity to come out to demonstrate. So
I think that's the same thing we just spoke about, saying that Kano also has a lot of pending residual anger that's going on with them already. But let's talk about what's happening in Suleja. Now, we saw a report here saying that 2 people have actually been taken to the hospital. And at this point, it looks like force is being used. But at what point does it get to where, the security agencies get to use force on the citizens? We asked you earlier about day 1 and day 2 of the protest. This is just day 1 of the protest, and we're registering that someone has been shot.
Kind of development.
I wouldn't know whether there was, when things like this happen.
There are 2 sides to the story.
You hear a lot of stories, 10 people killed, and when you go, the information will not be correct. But I think Niger State Police Command will comment on that. But there are processes, and it's in the Constitution, that when there is no other way, when you are trying to put down a riot, and people are being killed left, right, center, and you want to stop those killings, and there is no other way you can do it. Even some of your officers are already on ground, and then you have no choice. But
shoot up, right?
All right. Doctor, you're not a police officer, Lilian, and I don't think...
Let me answer. First of all, the police does not shoot into the air. We don't shoot.
Let's get that clear. So our listeners would know that.
They don't shoot in the air.
They should not shoot in the air.
They don't shoot anywhere. But now there is the protocol for riot dispersal. And I gave you from the baton section, you have the riot, the rifle section and all that. Now, when it gets to the stage that you are going to use lethal force, it will be made clear that, look, all persons, in the name of the head of state, all persons assembled here are commanded to disperse peacefully and go about their normal business. And they're armed with weapons, they continue to shoot, then you can only fire at their knee. That
knee level.
Yes, even when our training does not capture, police training does not capture shooting.
They are spelled out standard operating procedures.
Yeah, and even when we go to the range, it's at the knee
level. All right, let's take this message now from WhatsApp.
We'll fire at the knee.
All right, let's quickly take this last WhatsApp message now from Buhari Mohammed Inwa from Kaduna. He said, good afternoon. What happened in Kano is very unfortunate. They are just looters, not protesters. May Allah ease our suffering. Thank you very much there. Well, unfortunately,
those are the situations. But then again, let's go to Doctor who joins us from Kano. Dr. Aminu, I mean, we've seen the whole developments, but then again, I think it's now time for us to go on a break. And when we return, we'll be getting to Doctor to explore more on these developments and get more perspectives as the events unfolds, of course. Join us again.